Welcome to Georgia Week in Review. I'm Bill Nigut. We want to start the program this week with some good news. News about some schools in Georgia that are performing far better than some people think they might be performing. Education reform is a very big issue in Georgia these days. Governor Barnes has staked his entire first term on making Georgia's schools better. But today we are going to turn to a report that comes from the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, which every year singles out schools that have high poverty rates and lots of strikes against them, but nevertheless manage to succeed. And joining us for this discussion is the principal of one of those schools, Alice Thompson of Nancy Creek Elementary School. She's been there for 7 years, and in a minute you'll hear about the successes that she's had there. And from the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, Holly Robinson, who deals with education issues for the foundation and is instrumental in putting this report together. Thank you both very much for being here. Let me very quickly show you. This is one of the reports that comes out. It's the Georgia Report Card for parents. They do it for elementary, middle, and high school kids, or schools, every year. Holly, well, let's start by saying you talk about no excuses schools. Right. What's the whole point?
Well, the whole point is that these are schools that have a very high poverty rate, which is the poverty based on the free and reduced lunch. And then on our poverty index, which we create uniquely for our report card, which shows a correlation between high poverty rates and low test scores. And what these schools have done is they have stood up, they have beat the odds, regardless of ethnic or racial makeup of their school, family income, family background, and they have proven that all children can learn, and all children can learn to read and do math and write and all the kinds of things that we want all of our children doing in our schools.
Now let me ask you what may seem to be a self-evident question. Why should we assume that schools with high poverty rates might be lower performers?
Because statistically across, not only in Georgia, but statistically across the country, there is a true match between higher poverty rates and lower test scores. And that's done on a linear regression, and it's been done by state departments and by even the Federal Department of Education across the country. And the old Title I programs have run those types of statistics as well. Although the Title I programs and a lot of these other things have not been nearly as successful as Alice's school and the other schools, the 24 schools that are no excuses schools this year in Georgia.
The the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, and Alice, you were part of it this year, has a morning in which they recognize all the schools that they say have succeeded beyond expectations. It's frankly one of my favorite stories of the year to cover because it is a very good news story. Your school, let me go in. I should have looked at it. You performed, or I should have had it bookmarked, but I don't. But give me a second. Your school scored, these are based on the 4th grade criterion CRT test, right?
Yes.
Had an 85 achievement score, 85%, a 12-point increase from the previous year, and you had 38% of the students exceeding the standards for achievement on these tests, according to the report card this year. How do you do it?
Well, I think it starts off with commitment. And I think it starts off not only with commitment from the administration, but from the entire faculty and staff. We have a dedicated, hardworking faculty and staff. Our philosophy is that we feel that all children should be nurtured. We should provide nurture and secure environment in order for them to strive. Kids who come to school and feel safe, they will strive. We work extremely hard. We're creative. We do a lot of hands-ons, and this helps our kids' achievement improved. We have an open door policy. Parents can come in at any time that they want to come in to talk with me or to come in and talk with my teachers. They can go in to observe. You know, children are used to parents just coming in, observing for about 10 or 15 minutes and then just leaving out. And I think with all of this and with the high expectations that we have for the kids, I think that has helped a lot in the schools.
Boy, that's one of the key things, Bill, that high expectations. I hear that as I go around and visit these no excuses schools. That's one of the things that the principals and the teachers always talk about. They set high expectations. They not only set them, but they keep working toward those high expectations. That whole concept and that whole thrust for continual student improvement. That you can do it, you can do better, we know you can do it. That's a whole philosophy.
How do you do that practically on a day-to-day basis? How does that translate to the way you communicate to the kids at Nancy Creek on a day-to-day basis?
I think, first of all, parental involvement. That plays a big part, too. Our parents come in, they help out in whatever way they can. We have monthly volunteer nights from approximately 5:30 to 8:30 for the parents who work and who can't come in during the day. I think with children seeing their parents at school, I think that also helps them to achieve. They know that the parents in school, they're working together. We talk to kids every day. We do a pledge every morning on the morning announcement. Today is a new day, today is a fresh start. We talk to kids about what we expect them to do. The objectives are written on the board in every classroom. If you walk in any classroom, you're going to see the objectives written on the board.
What are some of those objectives?
It all depends on whatever the subject area is. You know, if
Okay.
it's reading, math, or whatever, the objectives for that day is stated on the board.
Give us a little snapshot of the population of your school.
We are approximately, and this is approximation, we're approximately like 49% black. We are about 21% Hispanic. I would say about 21% white. And I would say about 6% Asians, you know.
And you have a high percentage of kids who speak English as a second language,
We have
yes?
a very high percent. We have a full-time ESOL teacher there. We have a Spanish teacher there. I have 2 secretaries. One of them is bilingual. So we have worked really hard to work with these kids. We have several teachers who are on the staff who also speak Spanish.
Boy, is that an example of why the school succeeds? Leadership, leadership, and leadership. Every No Excuses school has a dynamic, thoughtful, caring, and focused principal. And that's so important, and Alice is such an example of that for all of us to recognize. And I think one of the other things that she mentioned, which is so significant, is bringing the family in. The parent, the guardian, whoever's there, and have their constant involvement. One of the other No Excuses schools in the state is in an area where parents have very little transportation, and they actually send out a school bus.
Yes, we do that too.
And to pick up, you do that as well, as they send out a school bus in the evening to pick up parents so that they can be there. So anything they can do to involve everyone that makes student learning the focus of what's going on, they are doing.
Yeah, it seems to me that, that there are always these themes in the schools that you pick. One of them being not accepting low standards, leadership. Now you talk about parental involvement. It's something we hear about as we go into poorer schools all the time. The parents are not available to come to the school, to be part of the school. They're not at home to help the kids focus on their homework. They're busy. They're single-parent families in many cases. They're working all the time. And is it difficult to get the kind of parental involvement you need at your school?
Well, I think it's something that you really have to work toward. At the beginning, at registration, our parents signed a pledge that they would pledge 9 hours per semester in the schools. And what we do is they sign in when they come in, and at the end of the semester, we usually look at the sign-in log. And what I will do is I will contact the parent, and I will say, you have not, met your 9 hours. Please, what can we do to help you? And usually, a lot of times, they will say, Ms. Thompson, I'm working 2 jobs. Please send some stuff home with the children so that we do that. We also have, like I said, the volunteer nights. That's once a month from 5:30 to 8:30. We have parents who work and can't come in today. They come out for that. And that has really been successful.
Holly, let me talk to you a bit about the governor's reform initiatives. Now, except for some political carping, most people believe that trying to set higher standards and trying to hold schools, both teachers and students, accountable has been a very good idea. But the schools that succeed in your report card go beyond just the basic reforms that the governor's tried to put in place, yes?
Well, yes, they do, and certainly these No Excuses schools are a fine example of what the governor lays down for the standards. But in any situation, if you say to someone, we'd like you to meet these standards, what the goal is always is to set higher expectations, to set that as where everyone needs to be. I mean, everyone needs to be able to read. And if they're in 3rd grade, they need to be able to read on the 3rd grade reading level. But then what you want is you want them to be interested in literature. You want them to be interested in, you know, art history. And if you're teaching social studies in the 4th or 5th grade, you want them to be able to meet the set standards, the statewide standards. But then obviously you want to enhance that. You want them to have more. So yes, what you're saying is absolutely correct. They're there, those standards are good, and we do all need to meet those standards. But we also need to work statewide to be sure that our standards are as good as they can be, and that in the particular subject areas and in the particular grade levels that the standards are set to get the students where they need to be to go to the next grade, and also to create the kind of careers and goals and visions that these youngsters have. And they do have them.
I'll tell you another thing that has helped Nancy Creek is volunteers. We have the senior citizen reading pals that come into my reading lab that help out every day. We have the Atlanta Jewish Coalition Literacy Group. That's about 50 to 55 ladies that come in and help. We have the Chamblee High School Cadet, Teacher Cadet Group that comes in. We have just an abundance amount of
Now, where do they come
volunteers.
from? How do you have them coming to your school? Is that something you've gone out and solicited?
That's something that we've gone out. Now, my reading specialist for my senior citizen reading pal, she has done that. For the Atlanta Jewish Coalition Literacy, that's something that my assistant principal and we have done. And we've also met with Chamblee High School to get the Teacher Cadet. And that has just been wonderful.
Well, the point is that that's taken energy on your part.
Absolutely.
Again, this is an example of how a school needs to reach out to bring these resources in. This is not something that's automatically provided by the DeKalb County school system or by the state that's trying to help. This is what you do to move forward. Yes.
And that goes back to that principal leadership that I talked about earlier. Those principals in the No Excuses schools have all gone out and have all done everything they can to help their students learn. And their focus, every single principal I've spoken to has one focus, and that focus is student achievement, student learning. And everything they do comes back to that very specific focus. Because if those students learn and those students achieve, they're successful. And it reflects very directly on the principal and certainly on a very strong faculty.
There are some very interesting stories about the obstacles that stand in the way of school success. Let me share one story with you. There is a school in the city of Atlanta where the principal was asked what she needed, what kind of help did she need to move ahead with her kids. And one of the things she said was, I need a clothes dryer. So why do you need a clothes dryer? It's because my students come from a public bus line that's a long walk from the school. And if it's raining out, they come to school in wet clothes, and there's nothing to change into, and they spend the whole day, you know, soggy and not focusing on education.
Right.
It's a remarkable thing to think about that sort of peculiar request that a principal thinks would move her school forward in some way.
And it's anything that makes the child comfortable and ready to learn.
And feel safe.
And feel safe. I know the little boy that I interviewed when we were all down together at the elementary school in the city of Atlanta, in Bethune. One of the little boys said to me, you know, this is my school. And I said, you know, I'm so proud of you that you've done so well. And he said, my teacher is Miss whoever his teacher was. And he said, and I like my school, and I feel safe here. And that's, Alice has brought that up a number of times this morning. You know, they need to feel part of a safe learning community. And these schools, these No Excuses schools, have created that larger community. And they have also, they are not shy going out and getting all of this other support, all these other support systems that are available if you really get out and look. But you really have to get out and work on it. And they are also not afraid, as Alice has very directly indicated, to get the parents involved. And if you don't have two parents, or you have a guardian, or you have a grandmother, or you have an uncle or an older brother, that's the person that is there, is going to be there some of the time. That's fine. You take whatever you can get in your support system to create that whole world of learning for the child.
Do we have a system that has produced a number of administrators around the state who are not prepared to take the kind of leadership role that we've seen in your no excuses schools? Is the system turning out leaders who are able to do this? If it did, we'd have many, many no excuses schools.
But, well, you know, I don't know if you want to blame it on a system as a whole.
Well, I understand that.
You know, it's much more the personality and the dynamics and the caring and the drive of that particular individual. And, you know, it's something that you very often can't put your finger on and say, that's the one thing that made that person different. Maybe it was that person's mother. You know, I mean, you truly never know what was the influencer that makes this principle so dynamic and so committed. You know, there are a number of things that go into there's encouragement, there's accountability, there's discipline. We haven't even talked about discipline.
And I think commitment. You have to be committed to make it work.
Well, we have run out of time for this segment, but our congratulations to you, Alice Thompson.
Yes,
we love to hear success stories about Georgia's public schools, and we appreciate your being with us today. And Holly, it's always a pleasure to have you, talking about this subject with us. We're going to talk a little bit now about President Carter's trip to Cuba, and we'll do that right after this. By now, just about everybody knows that this week, Jimmy Carter became the first former American president to visit Cuba, and his visit has stirred up some controversy here in the United States, but also some people feel he is making inroads that are very important for the relationships between this country and Cuba. Angelo Fuster is a Cuban emigre who came to this country 40 years ago, but as an active member of Georgia's political community, he has been back and forth between here and Cuba on many occasions, working with political leaders in both countries and looking at ways that we can forge better relationships. Angelo, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
There are some people who think that Jimmy Carter made a terrible mistake in going to Cuba this week, that he undermined American foreign policy, and shouldn't have anything to do with a country where our dealings are so sensitive. Does this trip end up accomplishing anything?
Oh, I think so. I think so. Carter's visit does not interfere with American policy, because I think we have not had a real policy toward Cuba, other than we're going to keep this embargo up, and that's been about it. During Carter, there was a little bit of during his presidency, there was a little bit of movement forward, but nothing else. Nothing has happened. Not much. His visit now, I think it's extraordinarily important and positive, perhaps more within Cuba than here. Already in the United States, there is a very powerful and broad-based movement in support within the Congress for lifting the embargo. A lot of Republicans in that, in the Midwestern states.
Because of their agricultural interests, primarily. Sure. Go ahead.
And the Cubans have been very shrewd. They've been buying. They bought about $90 million worth of our products in the last year, since January and this year. And they have bought in the Midwest and in the Southeast and in Boston and in the Northeast. So they've bought strategically. But as long as and until the Florida gubernatorial race is decided, I don't think that anything is going to happen positive. On the contrary, the opposite. I think the Republicans feel that the Cuban vote in Miami is crucial to a victory there, and so they're not going to mess with it. On the contrary, they're going to talk loudly and belligerently about Cuba. So I don't think they're making a difference here, except that it gets attention, even more attention in the public mind. Within Cuba, though, it's where the importance is, and I think that that's even more important. For the first time ever, the Cuban people have heard someone talk about their lack of liberty on national television and on radio. Carter got up there with Castro sitting in the front row and said, you know, you don't enjoy the freedoms that we do. He was not ugly about it, and he was not pushy, but he made the point very clearly, and it registered. It
was remarkable, I thought. Of all the images this week, the ones that struck me the most came when we saw Cuban dissidents actually talking to the American media openly about their concerns about the Castro regime. And Carter gave them voice. He referred to them the Cuban people don't typically hear about these voices out there.
No, it is entirely likely that the first time that they heard about this movement to collect signatures that the vast majority of people did, the first time they heard was when Carter mentioned it. You know, so it's gotten that kind of attention. I was talking to a friend in Havana who was telling me that the reports in the national media in Cuba, you have to remember that the national newspaper is also the official organ of the Communist Party. And that newspaper had no mention of any of this stuff, just said, you know, Carter opposes the embargo, all the things that they liked, they reported on. The things they don't like, they don't. So that live radio and television broadcast was essential to this thing. And the meeting with the church and dissident groups is key. I think he's done a tremendous job.
What does this do to Castro? Jimmy Carter leaves, and there's Castro still sitting there in control. In what ways does this affect Fidel Castro, do you think?
I think that it makes it difficult for him to maintain the kind of control that he has over so many years. It softens that, makes it more flexible. The Pope's visit did it with the church. Until the Pope visited Cuba, churches had to have their functions only in church buildings. You could not go out on the street. You could not go to a home and have a church service there. You could not go to any place and have an assembly. After any public space, after the Pope was there, all of a sudden a stadium was a possibility, a public stadium, because the Pope did it. And that has continued to be the case. That has changed, the flexibility of that has changed tremendously. There was a time when if you were a member of a church, you could not be in the government anywhere in a senior position. Today you can. There's a minister or two who are members of the national parliament in Cuba. You know, so it is a little bit, and all that stems from the visit by the Pope. Well, I expect the same kinds of things to happen not in a religious, but in a civilian way across Cuban society.
You said a couple minutes ago that nothing is going to change in terms of the U.S. attitude toward Cuba as long as Jeb Bush is running for re-election, and that makes sense, right. that huge Cuban-American population that wants no change in relations. But there are also those, of course, who say that nothing will change until Fidel Castro finally passes away. Is that right? Is it going to take the death of Castro, presumably from old age, to make a real change in American relationships with the country? And what's there after Castro?
Yeah, I think that is the easy way out. That would be the easiest way out for everybody. And what that tells you is that it is not the substance of the Cuban society that is, and the Cuban government that we have such a gut objection to, but it's the man. It is the man who is sort of spat on our faces for the last 40 years. Because there is a whole cadre of younger people, and they're all, the Cuban, essentially what is the Cuban ambassador here in Washington, it's a man in his mid-40s. He represents well-educated, conversant with a lot of things, studied in Europe. These guys are the new wave, and they're very, very committed to socialism, no question about that. So Castro will move on, so all of us have to, and he will. But I think that just like in the Soviet Union, those who are there now are going to be the ones who are there in the future. That's one of the few things that Cubans in Cuba, Cubans who love Castro and Cubans who hate Castro, agree on. Very few things. One of the things they agree on, that the future of Cuba has to be in the hands of Cubans who are in Cuba now. Not the Cubans in Miami, not the Cubans in New Jersey, not the Cubans in Paris, not the Cubans in Atlanta, the Cubans in Cuba. And so I look to see a sort of a transformation. You know, the Prime Minister of the Soviet Union used to be a KGB member. He used to be in the very heart of the communist government. I look to people who are like that in the future of Cuba.
With the couple of minutes we have left, you have been involved in helping Georgia agricultural interests deal with Cuba right now. What benefits could accrue to Georgia if we have a much more open trade policy with Cuba?
Tremendous benefits. The most obvious one is poultry. We have surplus poultry. I mean, we have chicken parts coming out of our ears, if I can make metaphors like that. We have, and the poultry people here and the egg producers are extraordinarily interested in this. Cuba's bought about $90 million worth of agricultural poultry, mostly in feed and eggs, in the last 6 months from the United States. Not much of that has been in Georgia, but some has. And then shipping. Savannah is an ideal port for all the East Coast traffic to come to Savannah and then go to Cuba. Mobile is working very hard to do that in Alabama, but it's on the other side, so it's a little bit different. So from shipping container shipping of all kinds, and then poultry, peanuts, they're interested in peanuts, and sod, interestingly enough, Georgia sod. There's in South Georgia, there's production of grass, the kind you walk on. And sod is a big thing as well.
So clearly there's some good reasons why Georgia business interests would like to do more in terms of Cuba.
Absolutely, and that's the reason that Tommy Irvin went to, the Commission of Agriculture went to Cuba a couple of years ago.
So give me a summary sentence. The Carter trip this week, as we finish up, is a positive thing, all in all. President Carter's visit is extraordinarily positive in all respects, but particularly, and I think where it counts the most, it will have a positive ripple effect in Cuba. Angelo Fuster, thanks so much for talking with us about a subject I'm sure we're going to be hearing more and more about in the months and years ahead. Thanks for coming in.
Will. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this week on Georgia Week in Review. We'll see you again next week. I'm Bill Nigut. Bye-bye.
Tonight.
Georgia Governor Roy Barnes is standing by the decision to change the state flag. In an interview with the Associated Press, the governor said if he had his way, he would not have dealt with the issue during an election year. But the governor said if he had to do it all over again, he still would support changing the state flag.
Several new firemen in Cherokee County got some important training.
Back pain breakthrough at the time shown on your screen. You don't have to suffer anymore.
See if the Brava Bra really measures up tonight at 10 on Fox 5 News.
For Sunday, May 19th, you found the Georgia gang. And topping our agenda today, a firestorm over whether President Bush was warned about 9/11. Zell Miller says Cynthia McKinney's still loony, and campaign contributions fuel the Northern Arc. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
For the week ending May 19th, it's time for the Georgia Gang.
And good morning, we're glad you could be with us. Is it just a press frenzy? Is it real? Was George Bush adequately prepared for 9/11? And Bill, I turn to you because I see this as partisan politics and the press kind of just going off on a feeding frenzy based on what we know of the warning to Bush.
You see it from absolutely the wrong perspective. Cynthia McKinney is not vindicated, first of all.
Okay, thank you.
Secondly, I'm beginning to doubt President Bush's competency. He went from immediately after 9/11 to the resolute, stalwart leader who knew everything and was prepared to take direct action to get Osama bin Laden and everybody else responsible. He has not done any of these things, and hardly a week passes that some other bit of information doesn't leak out that this man should have taken some sort of preemptive measures, security measures, before 9/11.
You could argue that Bill Clinton should have, based on the World Trade Center. She should have. You meant that, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Hillary should have.
Well, I'm sorry. You sound like the Democratic propaganda machine. I mean, I think it's indisputable.
A boy from Midtown say that.
Straight from Buckhead.
I knew he was
with a bullet. No, I mean, it is plain from what we have learned and are continuing to learn in this media frenzy that there was just an absolute cacophony, a din, a roar of intelligence information coming in, raw, unanalyzed, and I think you can certainly second guess how the CIA and the FBI dealt with it, analyzed it, whether they coordinated it. But to suggest for a minute that there was a clear and credible warning in advance that that particular attack was going to be carried out by Al-Qaeda suicide pilots on those targets.
I did not say that.
Well, you were getting to it.
No, I was not. Don't tell me what I was getting to.
Wait a sec, Bill.
I was not saying that.
You were saying
he
Bush
had
failed to
general
act.
information. I'm saying we failed to take general precautions against anything of that kind.
No, we
They
didn't.
notified
Bill.
the
We did take
FAA.
precautions.
They notified the appropriate agencies.
If they had notified the appropriate agencies, dear, and they had taken the appropriate action, the World Trade Center would still be standing, and several thousand lives would still be here.
Because the term hijacking, I agree with Condoleezza Rice 100%. The term hijacking took on a different meaning before September 11th. And maybe that was wrong, but the idea was that a hijacking might get you to another place, but that you weren't going to kill a plane load of people.
That had already been predicted they were going to use that form of terror in France against the Eiffel Tower.
Well, that had been predicted on Clinton's watch.
But I had someone tell me this week.
I'm not absolving Clinton. I think he is as much to blame as anyone.
But here's what happens here. People that are in the intelligence community, I had a guy tell me this week that has been involved in a lot of these kinds of issues, said, you write 10,000 memos in the course of your career guessing what might happen based on intelligence that you have. Most of the time, in fact, almost all of the time, you're wrong about what's going to happen. And people up the ladder say something about it. If you get one right, you're a hero. But he says most of the time you're guessing. And what's the big issue here is the communication between the intelligence agencies before it gets to the president.
You may wish to absolve your government. I do not. The government has a responsibility for security. If you want to sit there and say, oh, well, they couldn't guess right all the time, that is a stupid approach.
No, wait a minute. No, what I'm saying is
the warning was about hijacking, and it was suspected that it would take place on foreign soil against American installations overseas.
But there also had been a warning they would use an aircraft as a missile.
In 1993. 1994 came that warning.
George Tenet, the director of the CIA, was nearly frantic, according to press reports, for up to 2 months previous to this attack should give us all pause. Do we not listen to the CIA director in this nation?
I don't disagree
Do
with
we
that.
not coordinate all of these messages from the FBI? We've got this center for, and I think that's Bill's point, we've got this center that's supposed to collate, coordinate information, and it didn't do it in this instant.
But they were on high alert.
Wait a minute.
They were on the highest alert.
Let's back up a minute.
Why did this happen?
I have been in this media business for about a quarter of a century, and I have seen this high hill of hindsight crap too many times come back after the facts and with this past tense 2020 vision, and I don't believe in it at all. You know, are we trying to say that this administration had advanced knowledge and failed to act like Cynthia McKinney did?
We are not
Of course not.
Let's take a look.
Is anybody alleging that this administration had credible evidence of this attack on September? Of course not.
Cynthia McKinney and John Lewis seem to be.
Well, we're expending a good deal of heat here on that very issue, it seems to me. And my question would be to you, if you had general knowledge and general warnings that an Al-Qaeda network was out there, which we did, that they might be hijacking planes, even that they might be targeting buildings for a suicide attack, what do you do about it other than having a general alert? You know, what was the failure? What would you have had us do?
I will tell you one thing I would have had us do. Investigate these guys who are in flight schools learning how to fly an airplane, but not how to do it. That was not done. I would have done something about closing the borders. That was not done. There was a long list.
There's a hero FBI agent.
Would you have instituted the kinds of security measures we now have at our airports? And got voted out of whatever office you were in the next day?
Certainly, I would have increased the security at airports.
Bill, if George Bush in August or September had ordered racial profiling of Arab-looking dudes, the Democrats would have gone crazy and they would have called for his impeachment. No, I'm just saying that as one. I'm just saying that's one thing that the president could have done.
Well, there are many things he could have done. He could have grounded all the airplanes and really prevented it.
How about if he had announced an executive order saying you couldn't take toenail clippers onto an airplane. Then people would have thought,
that kind of order in school.
See, I don't think that this is a presidential failure. I don't think that this is a national security failure. I think that there were some FBI agents out in the field who passed along some very important tips, and they weren't acted upon. Now, if the president of the I don't think that the president of the United States is responsible for that. Maybe someone is, and maybe we should set up some system. But I don't think that it goes to the point of
Stop. Let's look at the local sideshow involved in this, though, because that's fascinating. Because a lot of this began with Cynthia McKinney, and you'll recall that McKinney hinted or suggested that President Bush knew about the attacks in advance and let them happen so that his family could profit from it. And Zell Miller, plain spoken as always, shot back the other day that he has no intention of apologizing to Cynthia McKinney, and he says it was a loony statement last month, and it is still a loony statement today.
Oh, well, I happen to agree with that.
You do agree with that? That's good of you.
I really do agree with that. But I also think that Cynthia McKinney is certain now to be reelected on the basis that it appears she has been vindicated.
Well, today, by the way, today, as we are seen by our vast television viewing audience, Cynthia McKinney is in Toledo, Ohio, speaking to a rally of Muslim groups in Toledo, Ohio, with Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. I wonder if she will crow now that she was totally right. She issued a statement to that effect, and she blamed it on race and right-wingers and all that stuff. She said she's been told to sit down and shut up over and over again. Well, I won't sit down and I won't shut up until the full and unvarnished truth is placed before the American people.
She'll be back in Congress next January.
I'd like to take this opportunity to agree with Bill that it appears she's vindicated, but she is not vindicated at all, and it just points up how dangerous her original assertion was that the president knew of it and deliberately failed to act because his friends and family hoped to profit. That is despicable and borders on treason.
It is a reprehensible statement. It was then, it is now, and these new revelations that we have show us that she could have made a far more responsible statement about the need for an investigation without adding all that other stuff.
And why is John Lewis agreeing with her? All right, we've got to stop this now, or we won't have time to follow Jimmy Carter through Cuba in funny shirts. Come back for that.
We'll have a round two.
That's right.
Before your day starts, Fox 5 Morning News at 5:30. Before the traffic jams, Fox 5 Morning News at 5:30. Before you step outside, Fox 5 Morning News at 5:30. When you're up, we're on. Fox 5 Morning News at 5:30. Dedicated to bringing you weather, traffic, news you depend on. Now, earlier. Tomorrow on Fox 5 Morning News at 5:30. Coming up tonight, the series finale of The X-Files and Fox 5 News at 10.
Hey, you know what? What? You gotta eat. Well, it's in your eyes. Ain't no surprise. You got a thing for checkers. Check it out. You gotta eat. Ain't nothing like this. You gotta eat. Ain't nothing like this taste. You gotta eat. You gotta eat.
I'm hungry enough for two. How about 2 quarter-pound Champ Burgers made fresh to order with all the toppings for $2? 2 Champ Burgers for just $2 at Checkers.
You gotta eat.
Wednesday's Child is brought to you by the Freddie Mac Foundation and the Department of Human Resources.
She beat a deadly addiction.
What type of drugs were you using? Crack. Crack cocaine, yes, ma'am.
And found a true soulmate.
I love this man. This is the man I planned on dying with.
But one fateful night.
I got the girl in my house, saw with my own eyes.
Would shatter her world.
That's true, but when she came home that night, we wasn't doing anything.
And open her eyes.
It feels as though somebody reached into my chest and pulled my heart out.
On the next divorce court.
All new Monday at 4:30 on Fox 5.
I want to feel like I'm at a stadium or a movie theater, but still have a place to spend some quality family time.
I got you covered. AT&T Digital Cable.
Perfect.
Lots of sports, great movies, and quality family entertainment. AT&T Digital Cable, everything you're looking for. Order today and get AT&T Digital Cable free for 3 months. Call 800-810-6242. AT&T Digital Cable, home improvement made easy.
The Fox 5i team undercover tomorrow at 6 and 10. High-ranking police official on a weekend getaway, and you paid for his ride. Atlanta police cars are for crime fighting and police business. So why did the Fox 5i team's Dale Russell find an Atlanta police car at a vacation home in Tennessee? The Fox 5i team undercover tomorrow at 6 and 10 on Fox 5 News. Tapes of Georgia Gang broadcasts are available for viewing at the Atlanta History Center.
I figured out how you get good public relations anywhere in the world, no matter how despotic, tyrannical, and dictatorial. You call in Jimmy Carter. The cameras, the reporters will follow. And Rick, I turn to you. This man will go to any length to achieve the Nobel Peace Prize, which would put him in the same company as Yasser Arafat. But at any rate, Jimmy Carter, everybody went. Jimmy Carter wore nice native costumes and gave a great speech at the University of Havana. Have I colored my question adequately?
Pretty much so, and I don't mind attacking a guy for his wardrobe. A one-size-fits-all Gallabia Filipino barber shirt looked great. You know, it's disturbing to me to see Carter lending support to a dictator. I agree with you there, but I'll reserve my commentary for an editorial in the Atlanta Constitution, which commended Carter in his speech for not trying to foist, that was their word, foist, American-style democracy on Cuba, but to appeal to general human rights. You know, since when does our nation deserve words like foist, as if we're trying to hoodwink somebody?
You don't understand who's on the editorial
talk
board
about American-style democracy. I mean, come on. And that's the kind of dangerous.
Well, in my view, Jimmy Carter handed Fidel Castro the greatest public relations victory that Castro has had since he routed Cuban emigres at the Bay of Pigs. He was able to showcase his so-called universal health system and universal education, and I mean, it made Cuba look like the island paradise that it could be.
I beg to differ slightly. He was the biggest PR coup Castro has had since Carter was president and let all those immigrants pour into the country. Criminals and mental defectives.
Well, I raised the question in my column, Bill. Do you think Carter's a masochist? I mean, going back to Cuba, which is the scene of one of his greatest failures, he might as well have gone to that desert in Iran.
Good point.
Very good point.
Or a local gas pump.
Well, I mean, the speech did have some elements in it when they talked about being able to petition the government. I think the Cubans didn't even know they had rights like that. But this moral equivalency argument is just not there. I love your point about that. And this, we're not a perfect country, and then listing all the problems. But we have a system where we can fix things. It just was, the moral equivalency bothered me.
The good news is that Jimmy Carter is our best ex-president ever, going around the world, trying to solve some of the world's problems, not going out playing golf every day. But actually engaging as a citizen of the world, using his influence around pressure points in the Middle East. We've seen him do it there. We've seen him do it in Africa. Now we're seeing him do it in our own hemisphere.
He cozied up to North Korea. He cozied up to North Korea, to Iraq, and now Castro and Yasser Arafat. I mean, this is a joke.
He has monitored elections, democratic elections around the world. I think that he's trying to open up dialogue in Cuba so that we can have, I mean, you know, this guy, a couple of 80-year-old guys, nearly 80-year-old guys talking to each other. We know one day that there's not going to be a Fidel Castro, and we're going to have a future and a relationship with that nation, and this helps us get there.
Actually, trying to sell chickens in Cuba.
And peanuts, yeah.
I think it's abundantly true that Carter legitimizes Castro by going down there, but, you know, I'll agree with you a little bit. He wasn't going away anyway. He's going to have to die before democracy will come to that nation. I think we can have a reasoned debate about lifting the embargo. You put more money, more tourists, more media in Cuba, it will lead to more freedoms. Just ask the Chinese.
I will take the last word on that because we've got to get out. And fortunately, President Bush is going to Miami tomorrow and is going to announce that he's tightening the embargo, which is what's got to be done. Because it's not the embargo that's impoverishing the poor people of Cuba, it is Fidel Castro. All right, when we come back, campaign contributions grease the Northern Arc. Stay with us.
On the
on next VIP.
Put the gun down. He's doing that hostage bit. I love this gag.
Someone wants this comic dead.
Another death threat.
But this time, it's no joke.
Everybody clear out. We got a bomb here. Let's go for a ride, buddy.
Now, Val has to keep this comedian from getting his last laugh.
You're running out of road, milkweed.
Action with an attitude. VIP.
Today at 5 on Fox 5 Atlanta.
Are you suffering from serious low back pain? Perhaps your doctors even recommended surgery. Well, now, there's another alternative.
A non-surgical breakthrough called VAX-D takes the pressure off the discs and spinal nerves and lets the back mend itself.
In a recent study of more than 900 patients, VAX-D was proven to be over 75% effective in treating these serious back problems.
Call us day or night for free information and consultation.
We know your health is important. That's why Fox 5 has a team dedicated to improving it. Fox 5's Beth Galvin. She built a network of medical experts so you stay fit inside and out. Dr. Steve Manoukian, an experienced cardiologist with information you can depend on for a healthy heart. Dr. Stan Winokur, from advances to prevention. He'll help you take charge of your medical needs. The Fox 5 Med Team, weeknights at 6 on Fox 5 News.
Her voice is weak, so it's up to us to be strong. That's why I appointed citizens to look into education reform. They listen to parents, teachers, community and business leaders, and I listen to them. As a result, we have higher standards, class sizes are shrinking, and schools are accountable to parents. We've taken the first tough steps to win the battle for these kids.
Roy Barnes, living up to the promise.
All right, get this. He belittles his girlfriend.
I was just somebody that was there for the time being.
Takes advantage of her.
He took money for 4 years. Well, yeah, I'm going to get money if I can. Money's beautiful.
And as if that wasn't bad enough.
Oh, my God.
Joe uncovers the ultimate slap in the face.
You would never take her home to meet your mama?
That's true.
But you had her playing, mama, paying you out of her pocket.
Next, Judge Joe Brown.
Monday at 3:30 on Fox 5. Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
The Atlanta Business Chronicle is way out in front on this story of the Northern Arc. We've stressed that for the last few weeks. And this week they're reporting that their analysis of Governor Barnes's campaign contributions shows that as much as $120,000 has come from people who own land along the path of the Northern Arc. Now, that's fairly logical.
But I would say the Atlanta Business Chronicle is really courageous, and they're countering their own editorial policy, which says the present route of the Northern Arc is exactly what this transportation program needs, the critics notwithstanding.
Well, that's right. But I don't think it's so surprising that developers give money to Governor Barnes.
Excuse me, I think your publication is way out in front because it's just engaged in baseless innuendo and saying if you happen to own land north of Buckhead and support some transportation improvements and give money to Roy Barnes, you're a criminal. Well, no, you're not.
But wait a minute. When the son of the chairman of the State Board of Transportation owns a lot of land along the Northern Arc.
It's Star 69.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I think it's important that that be reported, and I think it's not. You're not suggesting that Barnes is kowtowing to developers when you report that. You're just opening it up.
But you're not.
You know that the hand of Wayne Mason.
You're not also suggesting that Barnes is designing the Northern Arc to accommodate developers who may live in that area.
I wouldn't suggest that.
It's been on the books for 15 years. Who knows if it's ever going to come? It's going to be like, you know, many roads that have been on the books.
Now,
don't you think there's room for a principled debate about whether northern Georgia should grow anymore? You've got a metropolitan area of 4 million.
Yes,
you've got air and water issues. That go beyond the convenience of transportation.
I think that this is the principal debate.
I'd like to get some credit for it.
Mr. Yankee Rockefeller, I'd like to tell you, let me tell you something.
On the 30th anniversary of my being in Atlanta.
There is plenty of room for growth in North Georgia. I remember Georgia when there was no growth, You newcomers may want it that way, not I, sport.
Well, no, I think we do. No, but
in my 30 years here, Bill, we've gone from 1 million to 4 million.
You just arrived.
Yeah, I understand. But, no, I mean, the growth of northern Georgia did lift this place out of the mud. I know a good deal about it because I've studied it, and it's to be commended. When is enough enough?
But how can you stop
You've
growth?
not reached
That's
that
the
point
problem.
yet. Maybe they have in Oregon, maybe they have in Westchester or wherever you're from, but we've got
you're not going to stop it. What you've got to do is get the traffic off I-285, especially the trucks, and that's why the Northern Arc is vital. But I think the Business Chronicle is performing useful service in opening up. Now, what do we make of the fact that the 80-year-old chairman of the Department of Transportation Board, Bill Hastie, was making crank calls? I mean, he might as well have been calling up and asking if they've got Prince Albert in a can.
I know exactly what to make of that. He doesn't understand the modern telephone system.
I would have loved to have been on the other end of the line when that guy Star 69.
Was he saying this is Dick Williams calling?
But there's Star 69, there's caller ID.
Absolutely.
This is 202.
Again, some values here. You know, the paper did a ritual torture sling of him because he posed as Tom Jones, a reporter for the Marietta Daily Journal, and got caught. And in the very last paragraph, it's pointed out somebody killed a cat and put it in his driveway, an act of vandalism, which, if true, is a little more serious, I think, than a crank phone call.
Yeah, but it's my sense that the Barnes administration has got to be planning Mr. Hastie's retirement as we speak.
I thought he just got there.
Well, I know, but I mean, he's 80. They could say that it's time for him to retire. Don't you think so? Because any more playing with modern devices and conveniences might be a great embarrassment to the Barnes administration.
The Commissioner of Transportation's in his mid-70s. This is not an administration of youth.
But I have it on good authority that Tom Coleman does understand caller ID.
Maybe.
It was an object lesson to everybody else, wasn't it?
That's all that happened in the campaign this week. I think next week Sonny Perdue's going to make some news by changing the tone of the debate. Look for it.
What's he going to do? Talk about gas deregulation?
I think he's probably going to talk about Roy Barnes and not his Republican opponents. All right, we're out of time. I can't believe that. When we come back, it's winners and losers.
For weather info in your zip code, download WeatherBug from fox5atlanta.com.
If you're getting married, we'll rent you a tuxedo package for as little as $50, which is pretty good, considering her dress probably cost as much as your car.
Rent 4 tuxedos, and the groom's is free.
You're gonna like the way you look. I guarantee it.
These are the faces of hope. Hope for a place to call home. Hope for someone to love them forever. Hundreds of children are in foster care, waiting for someone to adopt them. Maybe that someone is you. Fox 5 and the Freddie Mac Foundation have formed a partnership to bring you Wednesday's Child. Our goal is to find a loving, permanent home for all of them. For more information on Wednesday's Child, call 1-877-210-KIDS.
My patients are like family to me. If they came in with a serious back problem, I usually refer them to a surgeon. But not anymore.
A non-surgical breakthrough called VAX-D takes the pressure off the discs and spinal nerves and lets the back mend itself.
In a recent study of more than 900 patients, VAX-D was proven to be over 75% effective in treating these serious back problems.
Call us day or night for free information and consultation.
I want to feel like I'm at a stadium or a movie theater, but still have a place to spend some quality family time.
I got you covered. AT&T Digital Cable.
Perfect.
Lots of sports, great movies, and quality family entertainment. AT&T Digital Cable, everything you're looking for. Order today and get AT&T Digital Cable free for 3 months. Call 800-810-6242. AT&T Digital Cable. Home improvement made easy.
Hey, you know what? What? You got to eat.
Well, it's in your eyes. Ain't no surprise. You got a thing for checkers. Check it out. You gotta eat. Ain't nothing like this. You gotta eat. Ain't nothing like this taste. You gotta eat. You gotta feed your face. You gotta eat.
I'm hungry enough for two. How about 2 quarter-pound Champ Burgers made fresh to order with all the toppings for $2? 2 Champ Burgers for just $2 at Checkers.
You gotta eat.
Tomorrow's Gridiron Heavies clash in the NFL's Black and Blue Proving Ground. Today at 1 on Fox 5.
And before we do that, I want to talk a little inside baseball. We mentioned the governor's race where Sonny Perdue is going to be taking a new tack next week to break away from the pack, but the pack may thin. Bill, you hinted in your newsletter, I've had a hunch for some weeks that Linda Schrenko, one of the 3 Republican candidates, may not qualify in June.
She's had a serious run of hard luck. She fell off a ladder. She injured herself. Her husband is very seriously ill.
Key aides are leaving.
Key aides are leaving. She's not attending state boards of education meetings. She is not attending campaign events, including a big one that you. I think all signs point to that.
She also has no money.
And she is reevaluating running in that
We'll
race.
see on that. And we also speculated last week that Barbara Dooley might run in the 12th district, which is 43% black. She has announced she's going to run. Makes an interesting race against probably Charles Walker's son.
What that does is galvanize the Democratic vote. I'm sure the Democrats will welcome her into that race.
All right, let's do winners and losers. Martha, I go to you.
My winner this week is Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana, who is a Democrat with presidential aspirations that gave the most reasoned look at what happened with President Bush and what he knew and when he knew it. My loser this week is the voters of the State Senate District of 50, State Senate District 50, the most Republican district that is held by a Democrat, and nobody has signed up and is on the horizon to run as a Republican.
Who's the Democrat?
Carol Jackson.
Oh, okay. Well, she was a targeted one before.
She was.
And nobody's run, huh? But they still got till June. Go ahead.
I'll make my winner the Atlanta Urban Design Commission, on which I no longer serve.
Thank you very
They
much.
gave out their awards for historic preservation this week, and there are an awful lot of people doing the Lord's work in Atlanta trying to preserve our history, and I commend them for it. My loser would be Al Hunt in the Wall Street Journal. Decided to use his column last week to attack poor old Zell Miller. Says Zell is for too much spending and too much tax cutting.
Called him a hypocrite.
And they called him a hypocrite. So Zell must be doing something right.
Go ahead, Jeff.
How about Richard Parsons, the new CEO of AOL Time Warner?
Got his work cut out for him.
He's got his work cut out for him. Boy, I'll tell you, that stock is in the tank, and he's got a challenge getting it up.
And it might affect the Braves.
Maybe they need to just spin that thing off. You know, maybe AOL or Time Warner. Either one of them is better.
Do an IPO on the cable.
Either one. And Charlie Smith also, I think, should be a winner. The legislator from St. Mary's, who will not be returning to the legislature. He was one of the good ones. Governor's floor leader, excellent legislator, excellent guy. Going back to St. Mary's to focus on family and law practice.
All right, Bill.
The Georgia National Guard hosted the annual Georgia Turkey Shoot big firepower contest of the Army and Navy and Air Force Guard in South Georgia. It was spectacular, and they did a great job hosting it. I enjoyed every minute of it.
And I've got a winner in Rennie Halford, Dr. James A. Halford, the 6-year superintendent of schools in DeKalb County. I think you'd agree with me, Jeff. He's stepping down. He was sort of put in there as a caretaker, a transition figure, and he did a great job removing the school system from the oppressive order for busing and all that sort of thing, and has brought order to the schools and hands them over to Dr. Johnny Brown in decent shape and with a chance for the future. And we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing.
Make Georgia the nation's leader in cancer research. Making that happen was one of many topics discussed today at a healthcare conference at Emory. Health experts hope to establish a statewide network of cancer care, especially in the minority and low-income areas that are traditionally overlooked. They say the Grady Cancer Center of Excellence, which opens next January, will be the first big step in that direction.
The last of the students who attended Columbine High School and college